Welcome. Good evening and welcome to the May 6th, 2026 APRC, ask the Ashland Parks and Recreation Commission study session. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn? Commissioner Weiner?
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Here.
Commissioner Adams?
Here.
Commissioner Gardner?
Here. We agree.
I just noticed the
Where are they?
lights are green now. I have to adjust to something else.
Oh, green for Joe.
Next item on the agenda is Winburn Way and Japanese Garden ADA ramp. And Dials will introduce that for us along with.
My mic is red now, so I don't. Rachel Dials, AD Director, Manager. Winburn Way, which includes no center line and a decomposed granite pathway down Winburn Way. Also at that meeting, they directed staff to explore ADA options, other ADA options for the Japanese garden. That includes a connection above the existing stairs near the pickleball courts to minimize grading and gradual slopes, and to also confer with the landscape architect. We have done that, and as you can see in front of you, this is the plan in your packet tonight. We incorporated the option 3 for Winburn Way into that plan. Kevin, do you want to talk about the ADA piece of it?
Sure. I'm just gonna, can I just get up here and point?
Sure.
We basically just reversed, on your guys' direction, reversed the direction of the path that we had last time. So the new path, we're recommending 2 ADA stalls and then a temporary parking, as former Commissioner Seffinger asked for. And so this would be, your flat sidewalk, try to meander around a couple trees. And then up here, we try to tie in the Japanese
Lantern.
And we'll also tie in this path into the new path, and this would go away.
So that last part is, those are the existing steps, but they'll stop at the new.
Yeah, they'll stop here. They'll be connected and they'll stop there. And this is really straight. I think we can meander this along the topography lines to make it blend in more in the natural environment. But it's all new because most of what's there doesn't meet ADA specs.
And the pathway closer to the Japanese garden entrance, the existing one would go away. And it would be
This is
rebuilt.
all new, all the way
Yeah.
to the garden.
What's the material?
Concrete.
Concrete. Commissioner Lunt.
Yeah, just a comment. I don't think aesthetics is going to really matter whether it's a straight line or curved. But what would matter is how it fits with the contour of the land. And I think that I wouldn't call it an aesthetic thing because I don't think it really has an aesthetic value. But it certainly could have a value in terms of less cut and fill and maybe less grade. So that would be my comment on that.
Commissioner Weiner?
So, and just looking at as you get close to the Japanese garden, it looks like there's an area where the existing trail sort of swept up around a rock and came back down, and it looks like the demonstrated new. I have 2 questions about that. Number one, I assume that's because that allowed you to avoid that quick drop at the end, so that
Yes.
allowed you to stay low on it. Getting in there and looking at the measurements, does that avoid any interference with that that big beautiful tree, that magnolia tree that's in there? It would avoid that. Okay.
Yeah, our goal Is this working? Yeah, it is. Our goal is to stay out of the drip line of all the trees, honestly.
And then on the plan, you'll also notice that because we kind of pushed everything back in order to accommodate the slope, the new plan, we had to move the DG path on the other side back to match where the handicap spots are located. So just that's closer now to the volleyball court and avoids the trees as well.
Just to make sure I do sound like a broken record, I'd love to see that trail actually connected to those stairs, those sort of somewhat decommissioned stairs that come from Granite Street. Spending a lot of time up there on Granite Street, I see a ton of individuals parking on Granite, trying to get down, getting lost on their way, not feeling that they have a clear direct access. You could continue that particular trail. I know there's cost associated. It wouldn't be ADA, not intending for it to be their stairs, but it would direct folks from there around to the proper side of the thing, because people do park up there to access it. But I know there's money.
It may be just signage. Commissioner Gardner, any comments or questions? Okay, Commissioner Long.
I'm not sure this turns off.
It's on.
A couple of comments. One is and a question. It looks to me like that's a pretty sharp turn. If two cars are meeting where the granitic pathway is, that's a pretty sharp turn. It seems to me it might make sense to extend the granite pathway both ways a little bit, so that isn't quite such a radical, where all of a sudden you have to make this radical turn. Because I think what people, if you leave it the way it is, drivers are going to end up cutting into the pedestrian area. So I think that would help. And then two comments. One is, and it's a little thing, but it's been my pet peeve forever, and so I'll just give it to you again. And that is where the lantern is. If you look really carefully where the base of the lantern is and where the sidewalk is, they leave a little tiny spot that will be nothing but weeds. So those should be meshed together rather than leave a little bit of a place for only weeds, so only will be able to grow there. And my other question is, I can't tell from this plan what's going on with the curb. Is the only place that you can get from your car to the pathway that one spot that says curb cut?
I believe so, yes.
So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, because it doesn't look to me like there's a place. So it looks to me that you'd have to get out of your vehicle, and if it's on the passenger side, you'd have to somehow get out of your vehicle and get around to the other side out into the street in order to get circle back to get to the curb cut. I thought when we talked about this before, the idea was to just not have a curb there, so you could go directly from the street onto the beginning of the sidewalk. So what happened?
That, to me, that's not normal. So if that's something the commission wants, we could certainly do it. There'd be an additional cost because you got to do the truncated domes, but it can be done. I just haven't seen 8-10 foot wide ramp. I've always seen them in one location.
And I don't have a problem with being in one location. I'm just saying I don't see the design for getting from out of your car, a safe way to get from out of your car to get to that curb cut. Because normally in those kind of situations, you have one curb cut, but you have a sidewalk at the front, and you drive up and the curb cuts to one side or the other of the car. I don't know, that's just, well, actually, usually you have an empty space between a handicap and the curb cuts there. So you drive in and you've got an open spot and you go right to your curb cut. Or this, you're gonna have to go dodge around, if you're in the front parking spot, around two cars to get there. So this just doesn't look like a safe design to me. So I'm not saying how it should be, I'm just saying, I don't think this is how it should be.
We can correct that.
Commissioner Gardner?
Test. Okay, it's on. You know, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I did wheel my wife's grandmother around for about 5 years in a wheelchair. And in this particular situation, it seems like generally speaking, you would take the wheelchair out of the back of the vehicle, bring it around side wherever the person was sitting, get them out of the car into the chair, and you'd be there. And that's kind of what I see this is you have the two locations, and you know, you're going to be helping a person out of a vehicle, whether they're using a walker or in a wheelchair, and you're going to get them into that a mode of transportation so that they can go up the trail. The ramp is simply for, say you had someone that had a modified van where they could actually pull out and get down to the ground, and then you have that space where you don't have to jump a curb. You have access to get onto the pathway, is what I've kind of experienced in the times that I've handled folks in.
Can I get a clarification? I can't turn this off, by the way. Are you saying that on the passenger side, rather than they step to the pavement level, they step directly onto the curb?
Yeah,
I mean, onto the sidewalk?
yeah. I mean, that's the way I always did it. You know, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
that according to, you know, Parks Manager Caldwell, that seems to be the typical setup. But you provide the ramp so that anyone that is has a unit that's in the street doesn't have to jump a curb. They have a ramp to get up to the sidewalk.
Yeah, I think that that idea of a low car, a sedan, and getting a person who needs a wheelchair, getting them from the sedan seat onto the sidewalk, up the curb, that's a pretty good pull.
And the other comment was when I was talking with Kevin Caldwell is when you don't have a curb, then people might tend to pull onto the sidewalk because there's no curb to park at. So, you know, once again, you can mark it and everything. And
Well, there is another solution here, and that is to just make those parking spaces wide enough so, you know, if I have someone that I want to get on the passenger side with a wheelchair, theoretically I'm paying attention, so I could park further away from the curb, giving myself some space. So that's the other option, is just have a wider parking space so there is more room for that to happen.
And I'm just going to ask that we direct these through me so I can keep one person on the
sorry.
floor at a time. Okay. My guess is there's some standards involved here. I'm looking at the Director of Public Works right now, and that we ought to be in general alignment with those. So let's, since he's here and he came to talk about some of these issues, let's get him up here and get that answered. In other words, are we debating something that is written down somewhere as a resolution already? Thank you, Scott. Scott Fleury is going to introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. So in some of these circumstances, there's a lot of ways to accomplish the task and the goal at hand. And looking at this, I just saw this last Thursday for generally the first time, and you're definitely going to want to have a loading and unloading zone that's flat. So just think of it as someone is in a van and they are in a powered wheelchair and they're coming out, the door opens out, they come out, come down to a flat area. You want them out of traffic because they're coming out on the passenger side. The other, occasionally you'll have people come out of the driver's side or help them out of the driver's side. There are multiple circumstances of that. The primary design is to accommodate something coming out of the passenger side and keeping them out of the traffic way and protected, and then giving them direct access to the location that you want them to go, which oftentimes requires a curb ramp that is a connecting feature to the pathway and sidewalk. And looking at this, I would say you could almost put the curb ramp in between the two parking spaces as that connector. So that way, they're both traveling the same distance to that access point instead of one person going further downstream and then coming back upstream, as an option. As part of that, as part of marking and striping, you're gonna mark the spaces as ADA spaces, and that loading area, you're basically gonna chevron that off to try to demarcate it to say, you can't park here, you park here, as a visual representation. That way you keep people, for most of the time, from not parking in that area where people should be actively loading and unloading as part of that system.
Thank you, and I'm looking at Acting Director Dials. Does that make sense, and can you guys work that into your plan?
We can.
And I'm just suggesting, and I know we're working on closer communication between our department and Public Works, is that ongoing conversations like this with staff, to the extent it's possible, will make these things go better. Commissioner Long.
So for Director Fleury, it sounds to me like what you're saying is what I was saying, which is to make sure that there's space between the curb and the cars so that there's room for passage of wheelchair. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that loading zone, I believe, generally is about 7 foot wide to provide that safe space for a person to get out, maneuver around, and then get to their location where they transfer onto the curb ramp, onto the sidewalk ADA path that would take them up to the Japanese garden at that point.
Can you show me where the 7 foot wide space would be? I don't quite get it.
So if your curb line is right here, and your parking space is 7 foot wide or 8 foot wide, that curb goes away and this whole area becomes the flat navigable space. And so that's your 7 foot flat spot right there. And like I said, just without seeing all the grades and everything like that, I would maneuver this ramp to the middle area and then connect to the path that way. That way, each access or each parking space has the same direct access point to that. I don't know, Kevin, if there's kind of a need for a retaining wall because of the, so you would have to have some form of a retaining wall, a small stack block or something like that, in order to hold that embankment up and cut that area flat. But that way, that you still have to allow for surface drainage and not pool water in that area. So drainage has got to get off that concrete pad essentially and downstream, so you don't initiate any bird baths and slick spots for people trying to use that area as well. So that's something you got to accommodate when you do the final grades and design as part of that.
So I'm still want to make sure I understand. There would still be a curb there, or there would not be a curb there?
There would not be a curb. It would basically I'm thinking of 4th and A in front of the yoga studio. There is a parking bay, and through that parking bay there is a little valley gutter that keeps the gutter line across, so your drainage keeps going, but there's no curb from here to here. You just make sure that the drainage keeps going in that previous curb line.
Thank you. That's basically resolves all my concerns.
Commissioner Gardner?
So just to clarify, so is there any need for a ramp then?
Oh.
So Not knowing that
Yeah.
you would still put truncated domes because you need some sort of representation of the
Yeah.
access point.
Okay.
Because it's not just for people walking and rolling on a mobility device. It's also for visually impaired people, for them to be able to locate as a starting point for a pathway.
Okay.
What is a truncated dome?
Each intersection, you'll see them in town. They're a plastic, basically 2x4 insert that goes at the bottom of any ramp. And it's a detectable surface, so people can feel it with their cane or their feet as a access point or ingress or egress point to the street or to the sidewalk.
It's kind of rubberized?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll see them, they're red around town and some are yellow around town. Without knowing the grades, you could look at that right there at the start of the pathway. Could be that curb ramp portion of the access to the ADA path to the garden itself. So that would be something I'd say, the engineer would look at as part of that. Can we make it grade-wise work? These ramps are super tricky. There's no tolerances anymore. You have to be within grade, and this is based on ODOT standards, or they get rejected. And so there's very fine grades, cross slopes that have to be met in order to be fully compliant. So that would be something that they should just look at as a possible access point with the ramp right there. But you definitely want the truncated dome access point.
Good with me.
Thank you for being here.
As long as staff understands the options. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Anything else on this
Yeah,
one?
no, so I want to keep Scott up here for a second. So once we revise all this, we can work on a cost estimate. In the current capital improvement plan, there's $50,000 for ADA, general ADA improvements and $250,000 for Lithia Park Master Plan work plan projects. Pending funds and pending timelines, staff thinks we could probably move on this in 2027. We won't be able to move on it this year because of the other projects we have in the hopper. We have East Main Park coming down the pike. We have, we're right in the middle of Butler Perazzi Fountain, and we have tennis court rehabilitation coming up. So this would fit in the timeline sometime next year.
And East Main.
I said East Main,
Oh, I didn't hear
yeah,
that.
East Main, yeah. So I wanted to have, the reason I invited Scott to come, thank you for being here, is to, when we started talking about Winburn Way, once we went through the process, we went back to talk to Scott about the option 3 plan. And as the Public Works Director, he had some other thoughts on Winburn that I wanted to ask him to be here tonight to share. That could be in lieu of what we've already worked on. So I wanted to have Scott share those.
So, and you heard what the Transportation Advisory Committee talked about previously, and their general recommendation for the status quo. One of the things to consider as an alternate to that, and this is how Winburn Way acts normally, the fancy term is called the WUNRF, but it's also what we kind of classify in our transportation system plan as a shared roadway. Curb to curb, all modes of transportation have the right to access that space. In our kind of cross-section design, we post those roadways at 20 miles an hour. This roadway is posted at 15 miles an hour already. In generally shared road status, we look at putting a few share the road signs, and it has the bicyclist and pedestrian on it. And then we also look at putting the Sharrow roadway markings, and those would be directionally uphill and downhill. The general recommendation is about a 250-foot spacing. That alerts the drivers that there'll be bicyclists in the roadway, and then the signage alerts drivers generally that pedestrians will also be in the roadway itself. Just looking at kind of the speed and volume data from the traffic study, one of the things we talk about is, yes, there are speeders. There isn't an overt amount of what I would say speeding. And you are never going to solve the problem of speeders because people will habitually speed and exceed the speed limit. But you can alert other people who would normally drive around the speed limit that there are additional things to be aware of along that corridor. For example, Faith Avenue, in between Siskiyou and Ashland Street, we converted to a shared road a couple years ago, or bike boulevard kind of combination. So there's sharrows along that. It's posted at 20 miles an hour, and there's signage. Orange Avenue, we did the same thing across Laurel and through that whole corridor. It's a 20-mile-an-hour posting. There's share the road signs. There's signage. So that's kind of another alternative to consider as well. The concern that I would have is, if you're pushing pedestrians to one side of the road, how are you going to enforce them actually using it that way versus how they have historically used that roadway, So getting a mindset change is going to be difficult to a certain degree if you're expecting all pedestrians and cyclists kind of to stick to a zone, I will say, on the roadway. So this is just, it's a cost-effective, simple mechanism to let people know what this roadway is about and how it's supposed to be used.
One way I'm looking at it as you speak is that the newer idea with the DG is an option. So people who do want to use it will get in the habit of using it. So it is a place to get off the road. I think everything else you've mentioned are great ideas. I live on B Street, and as you know, recently it became a shared road, 20-mile-an-hour signs, and I think that's a good thing to do here too. Although I think we should stick at 15 and hope that people.
Yeah, I would
attention
not
to it.
change that because it really isn't technically what we consider a street and a public right of way, since it is part of Lithia Park. So you have the power to keep that 15 mile an hour without the state interference as part of that. So I would definitely recommend keeping the signage posted at 15 miles an hour as part of that.
You don't see adding what we were talking about along the side of the road as a increase in danger or anything. It's just maybe unnecessary in your view.
That's what I would say. It's really, the hard part is enforcement and training people that that's where they should be when they've never been there to begin with, unless a car is coming down the road and they move to the side.
Okay.
And that's kind of the function of a shared road is Grandview, people walk up and down Grandview in the middle of the road until a car comes, and then you meander off to the side, everybody passes, and we go back to the normal operations, so.
Right. Okay. Commissioner Weiner, then Commissioner Lott.
What I would say about the plan is that the original concept with the line for walkers still put bikes in the road. And so this actually would probably be a little bit of a safer approach because there was going to be bikes there anyway. So this is going to notify them. It's going to clearly align, in my opinion, that there's going to be bikes, probably some pedestrians. People are going to be considering that. So I think it's actually a pretty good solution. The other thing I think it does as well is allow for longitudinal planning for an out of roadway pedestrian path, be it DG top to bottom, or when we are flush with money again, because that's coming. A concreted sidewalk, and longitudinally, that's probably a superior solution to the pedestrian component as well.
Yeah, and the ADA path can be granitic material as long as the cross slope meets it. But also remember that if you are telling someone to walk here, you have to make sure that they can get up and down from that spot as well. So they have to have an access point and an ingress and egress point. If you are saying, this is where we want you, you have to accommodate the ability for them to use that path.
Well, I think the adding sharrows would make a lot of sense. The signage on the pavement. one of the things that, backing off from what we were going to do would, instead of having an orange street, a nice narrow street that by itself tends to slow vehicles down, we'd be going back to this wide, broad street, way broader than it needs to be for the traffic. And so we're sort of, we're not addressing that at all. And I think that we've spent a lot of time coming up with this process, went through a lot of meetings, a lot of public input, and it's not very expensive. I think we should try it. And if it doesn't work, we're not out that much. I think we should use the idea, like I say, for the bicycles and the automobiles are sharing the same portion. So that putting signage on the pavement for them, I think, is a great idea. I don't think we would want to use the share the road, because that really implies that there is no place for pedestrians, and we're creating a place for pedestrians. So I'm for staying the course, but understanding that we should look at this, and if we find it's not working, we can, without really a whole lot of effort, we can fall back to something different in the future.
Yeah, unmarking is pretty easy. Marking and unmarking is pretty easy as kind of a pilot structure overall.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Commissioner Lyon. I think that these are great suggestions, and they're additive to with the project we're already pursuing, and I agree that we should give it a shot. Commissioner, excuse me.
Thank you, Chair.
Talk tonight.
So, I would be disappointed if we didn't move forward with the project as we've designed it. I realize there's certain things that need to be looked at. One of the questions I would have is, at the portion that we were just looking at across from the ADA parking, if we have to jump the curb to get on off the roadway for 50 or 100 feet or whatever it is, what kind of, do we need those, the ramps, the bump ramps so people would know?
I would say yes, that's your kind of best practice to install the on-ramp and off-ramp essentially
Yeah.
to get onto that pathway. I know there's multiple ADA standards. Some are park specific, some are right-of-way specific. What I would recommend is, looking at the park specific ones that might allow for a non-concrete solution. You might be able to do a different solution for that. And I'm not an expert on the park side of the ADA rules by far, but there might be a interim or mid-level solution that would allow a curb cut and grade and access up to that point that would be a lot less costly than, a $15,000 ADA ramp at each location.
Right.
Yeah.
And luckily, it's relatively flat there. It's not,
Yes.
we're not on a major grade
Yes.
or anything, so.
Commissioner Weiner?
As we're talking a lot about ADA, I'm thinking about the new Butler Prosy fountain that's going in, and if I understand ADA federal rules, it would suggest that if we're creating a new facility that had a pedestrian area on it, we'd need to create ADA access to it as well. Is that your understanding, or is that a misinterpretation of how the rules are written? Does that not qualify?
So I had this conversation with the team a little bit ago, and my recommendation is yes, that you will need to plan for ADA access to the fountain. It's one of those things, you are directing the general public to this feature. And so in order to accommodate everyone, there should be an ADA pathway. What you do in those circumstances where if you don't have it right now, you initiate a plan and a process to put it in place. It's not you have to do it now, you just have to make sure that you're progressing towards it.
And that's what we're doing currently with the Japanese garden.
Yeah,
after 3
it's the
years
same
after we
thing
built
with the
it.
Japanese garden, having
Yeah.
that.
Okay, thank you for that, and it wasn't part of this item, but it's important that we touched on it, and I'm sure Commissioner Gardner has got his ears wide open on that, or maybe already be thinking about it.
We've
Commissioner
had
Lunt.
multiple discussions. I would just add that we're also under, we need to install probably $40,000 worth of railings on the Butler Parazzi Fountain that currently aren't there to meet certain ADA requirements.
I'll just say it's not a surprise, these projects always seem to have that element. Commissioner Lunt?
There actually is a pretty easy access, a way of gaining access to the Butler Parazzi Fountain that would also provide an alternative AD access to the Japanese garden that you don't have to go by. And it's actually, it's a pretty logical spot because it would delineate the grassy area of the bandshell area from a shrub bed, which is always nice to have a mow strip between those things. And I've been trying to get someone to look at that for a while, so maybe now there might be a little traction for that. But I'd love to talk with staff about that one.
I'll add that to the list.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for the director? That it would be Scott. You have a question or?
I was just, the other thing I would say to think about in the future that I've talked to staff with is along that section corridor, if you are having, there was the temporary crosswalk that was put there while the Japanese garden was being constructed. You know, if there's other locations where you want people to cross the road, a high visibility crosswalk, but you could also make it a tabled crosswalk from a traffic calming standpoint where you would just raise that crossing. And it acts sort of as a speed hump generally to slow people down. And it has that vertical delineation that you see as a driver and then the high visibility. So that's also something, you know, if there's definitely concern about, you know, speeding and things of that nature moving forward, and you're looking at those as part of a planning process, potentially look at implementing raised crosswalks as part of an overall corridor plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner.
Just a real quick question on that. Is there, there's probably design standards for those?
Correct.
Is there a linear, like, do they have to be spaced so far apart?
No, it's not like, there's no separation distance where they would have to be 250 yards away. Yeah, they can be in close proximity.
But there's design standards to the height and
Correct.
all that.
Hersey Street, there's 2 along Hersey Street between Oak and Mountain.
Okay, I see these items up here, and so I'm going to ask Acting Director Dials to respond back to us what she thinks she understands about each one, and then we'll
Sure.
try to clarify.
So considering suggestions from the Public Works Director, what I heard is that the commission wants to move forward with a current option 3 plan with the addition of some potential bike sharrows. And then on the draft ADA plan, look at a flush entry and making the loading zone area wider.
I would
think
say,
that's-
I would say definitely the loading zone wider. I mean, that's my opinion.
I guess it depends on how big the flush, like the area is already. So if people are just opening into the,
Right, and obviously
the
the drainage
flush.
issues, but
Yeah.
just in general, it seems like there's no reason to have a curb there if we don't need one. Commissioner Lunt?
This probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. It seems like Director Fleury has the best understanding of that change in the ADA offloading area. So I'm assuming that he'll be a part of that process.
Yeah, we'll make sure that Scott's looped in on the draft plan moving forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weiner?
And I didn't hear just the consideration for where and how to put that bump thing, what do you call it? Truncated domes, where that should be, whether it should be centralized or moved to the front. There was some
yeah,
discussion
truncated
about how
domes
we
on the
wanted to
list,
do
yeah.
that.
Yeah, depending on the grades and what makes the most sense, I would recommend either in the middle of the two spots or at the head end of the first spot as a direct access to the path itself.
And you are your designee will be involved in helping us put those in the right place?
Correct.
Thank you.
I made another suggestion that didn't come up, and that was to extend the granite pathway to make so there wasn't quite such a radical turn at that point for vehicles. And I would defer that if Director Fleury doesn't think that's necessary, I would defer that. It seems logical it would be, but I would defer to him.
I'd have to sit there in my vehicle and take a look at the curvature and the sight distance. That would be one thing I'd say. We just, put a lath up on one side and a lath on the other side, just so you kind of get a visual representation of the distance, and drive through it a couple times and then just sit in the travel lane, kind of taking a look at what the visual corridor looks like as a driver. Off the top, it makes sense to me to extend it a little bit, but it's hard when you don't have that visual picture looking directly at it.
And I'll just comment that that's why we have staff to do those details, but we're here to worry about the liabilities and what have you, and it's aesthetics, but we do rely on you folks for those fine points.
And then I think the other piece that I heard was to make sure that the pathway connects to the lantern in a way so as not to leave any weeds to grow in that spot.
A gap between the concrete.
No gap.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to what the commissioners have to say, and I feel like I feel like we're gonna have a better product for this conversation. So thank you.
Indeed, thanks for coming in, and we'll see you again in the near future, maybe.
Thanks, everybody.
So I just want to clarify, does the commission want to see a plan with all of the new information, or do you want to vote on it next week with just like the list of things that we discussed? Because we'll have to go back to the engineer and have him, look at the plan again and do some more tweaking to the plan, so it would not be ready to vote on next week. Or we could, I could just put in the memo all of the discussion we had tonight about the things that need to be included in the plan.
My personal preference, and we'll get input from everybody else, is to go ahead and vote next week. If that's not too far out of normal operating practices in terms of having a few loose ends that we expect to be picked up along the way. Mm-hmm. Commissioner, anybody else? Weiner.
I'll just say my only concern with that is we've made possibly some significant enough changes that the budgetary concerns may be may force us to look at some slightly different modifications. So I could see doing it, but I would want to have at least some sort of an idea of what the cost differential may be.
I just don't see why we wouldn't want the plan before voting on it. It seems like, I mean, I don't know that it would really going to make that much difference in terms of the timing, and it gives us a lot better idea of what we're actually voting on.
Yeah, we still have plenty of time we could take it back
You
to
know,
engineering.
I just sit here thinking, well, it's a month between business meetings, and
Well,
so.
I was thinking about, we might be able to get it back it back in June, but we would not be able to get it back for the meeting next Wednesday for a vote.
Can we go from might to we can get it back in June? Looking at Kevin.
I was thinking, I was specifically thinking about our meeting that we have next week.
Uh-huh.
We will not have it back.
I understand that.
We
So
might be able to have it back for the June meeting.
might, okay. I just hate to see it go to July and all that, you know. And at one point, and I'll call on Commissioner Adams, we were separating these two. We're still kind of separating them, right? We're going to do, in fact, I would go so far as set this up on the agenda to have two different votes. Could we vote on the pathway work next week?
So you've already voted on Winburn Way and
And we're
option
not
3.
changing that. We're going
The
forward.
only thing we're adding to that is the bike sharrows. So you
Which
could,
really is almost a different thing. It's just agreeing to make that whole stretch safer.
Yeah.
So we are already set to get going on the first part. Now we're just talking about the ramp,
the ADA,
the
yeah.
ADA part. Okay. I'm going to retract what I said and kind of agree with Commissioner Lant now that we should probably have it tied up a little tighter than this. Commissioner Adams, then Commissioner Gardner, I think I saw a hand.
All these different colors is on. I would agree with Commissioner Lant as well, especially given the time frame that I think I heard you say, which is that we would do the work no sooner than 2027. And to me, therefore, if we were given a time frame of, say, no later than August, I would feel very comfortable with that. You know, it's not, this isn't like some of the other projects that we're looking to break ground on this summer, and I think it makes sense to give those priority.
Just to clarify, so we're saying calendar year 27 is when this would be scheduled?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
And it was obviously pending budget, cost estimate, all of that.
Okay, so we'll see it back when it's ready.
Yes, and
And
we'll
I'll-
try to continue to.
I'll lower
to
my
hurry it
sense of
along.
urgency.
I feel like this is like, takes up every meeting that we have.
We do have a lot going on. I
Yeah.
want to be careful we don't put things on the back burner
Right.
unnecessarily.
We'll keep moving forward.
But we do put it up when it's necessary. Okay, we'll call an end to that item then. Next one is the next steps on refining the vision, and I did sit down and get my thoughts together, and I got that out exactly 24 hours ago, or a little more than that maybe. But I just continuing the conversation I started at our strategic workshop, which is trying to develop a set of statements that have two purposes. One is, well, I'll just read it. It is meant to inform the upcoming biennial budget discussions that will be firming up about this time next year, spring of '27, for the biennium ending June 30th, 2029. It's to set the stage for we think about this biennium and then how it's going to flow into the following biennium. Every 2 years, 2 or 3 positions on the commission go before the Ashland electorate. As some of us leave and new members join the APRC, I believe that memorializing this particular commission's view of the future will serve as a guide for policy implementation after the next commission takes office in January 1st of '27. And the reason I find that personally important is having come on the commission as an appointee and then following up by being elected, there's a sense of, well, where are we at and where are we going and what have we done? And it's just oral history and different opinions about oral history. And so I thought this, if it were to become a part of the rhythm of commissions coming and going every 2 years in the second year of each commission, spring of the second year of each commission, then there would be some continuity in what we're about. So it's kind of philosophical. On the other hand, it's also us agreeing to a certain set of value judgments and aspirational goals for the next 3 biennia. And I think there's some value in that, but I don't want to overburden the commission with it. It's my personal mission right now. And so I want to be sure that you want me to continue to bring these to you as we refine them, or whether I should just do it as a personal project. But with your permission, If we could, I'll ask people to respond to what you have in front of you. I don't want to read all of this into the record. Any comments or questions or thinking about this whole project of mine? Commissioner Lott? I'm trying to decide whether it's a commission thing or just me.
Well, the way it's outlined here, it sounds like it certainly could be a commission thing. It's broad enough and general enough. I didn't understand under the parks, open space and trails, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth bullet, we stand ready to assist administering Ashland's current and prospective open spaces. I didn't understand that because we administer them, we don't assist administering them. So I'm wondering what your thinking was.
My thinking is something like Madrone Ridge, which is a giant 2,000 acre open space that the council may decide to bring into the city's portfolio. And in that case, the reason for getting it is probably largely fire mitigation, in which case it would be the fire mitigation people that would be doing most of the actual work. That's what I mean by administering. In other words, there are possible, I think, what I see looking at this, what the thinking of the Council on Fire Mitigation is that there's a sense of acquiring open space around the city might be a good long-term project to increase resilience, and that might not necessarily be our open space to administer, but we'd be ready to help. That's all I'm saying. In other words, we are good at administering open space, but what I'm seeing now is the character of open space sort of changing because of the fire risk.
And I think I would just wordsmith that and just say something like, we will continue to administer parks, open space and trails, or just open space lands, and stand ready to assist administering prospective future open space, or something like that. But I would delineate, because the way it is now, it just sounds like we don't have any that we're not manage on our own.
Okay.
And I don't want to see us in writing infer that we don't manage those lands.
I get that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this out tonight to have a little discussion, given that we don't have a long agenda. I don't want to wordsmith the whole thing. If we just want to tag and anything that, with just what your comments about why it's a little vague or whatever, or I always invite you, if we're going to continue as a group on this, just to send me things offline that you'd like to see on here. I'm not trying to create a document, ask for your approval. I'm trying to jointly create a document. Thank you. Let's try anybody else and I'll come back. Commissioner Adams.
I think for something like this, process matters. And while I might have a lot of agreement with what's on here, might have some, minor edits like Commissioner Lott was just suggesting, I'm not a big fan of this process.
How would you like to change it?
I would like a document like this to be co-created. I would like the pros survey that members of our community spent a whole lot of time filling out to be specifically considered by this commission. And with public meeting laws, frankly, sending you emails, it's not, in my mind, it's not a inclusive process. The creation of a document like this is what I thought that the retreat was supposed to be about. It wasn't about this, and so to have the document sort of pop up 24, 27 hours before a meeting, I'm not loving this process. I don't as a commissioner feel a part of it. So that's again, it's not so much that I have beef with what's on here. I think there's some good stuff. I think there's some stuff missing. I think there's some stuff that could be changed. But to me, it should be co-created.
So scheduling another maybe shorter 2-hour session to pull in.
Perhaps.
The pros information's available for all of us. I haven't spent a lot of time deep analysis. I have some big takeaways from what I've been hearing from staff over the process. And I don't think we can just, there are a lot of ways to attract that, but it sounds like you want to sit down again and just focus on, this is kind of a starting place. You want to just take it from start to finish and have a conversation and figure out what it-
I recall, sorry.
Go ahead.
I recall we did a staff retreat 4 years ago when I first got on this, and it actually started from a place of co-creation. These are things we've been working on in the past. What are things that we want to take off? What are things that we want to add to it? And we co-created it. We got a different version of that a year and a half ago, which was like the director said, "This is my list." And I didn't love that, and I spoke to it at the time. And though I like your list better than the director's list, it still feels a little bit like that from a process perspective.
Well, and frankly, the difference is this is strictly commission level thinking, but it was
Right.
my list based on what I heard.
Right.
So I get what you're saying. Anybody else? Commissioner Gardner, any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. First of all is, because I was involved with enough talks with city management about breaking certain sections of this away from the commission, I'm glad to see it laid out 1, 2, 3, parks, open space, trails, recreation, senior services, because I felt there was a push, although it's not as intense now, to really change the whole nature of what the commission was about and what the Parks Department looked like. So I like that portion of it. The only other comment I would have, and I haven't delved into the city strategic planning enough, but that somehow we need to align our strategic planning with what the city's coming up with somehow. I mean, we need to figure out how what we're saying fits in with the city, because we're going to have to align that way,
Right.
especially in the coming budget season, I see.
Right, and what I'm coming to think about that is what we're doing is planning for a single department.
Yes,
And so we fit into their strategic plan in
Yeah.
the sense that Parks is a department.
sure.
Really, it's a whole different thing, process. I'm just,
I mean, if in the past, like decades ago, we always tried to align, we would try to align what our goals were with what the city's goals were, to make sure that we were on the same page as far as justifying our budget.
I'll tell you one place where we're in complete alignment, from what I'm hearing, and not so much with the strategic planning, but just the talk, is parks, which I wanted to point out that we're about done building parks, and we really want to be sure that we are focused on deferred maintenance, and that's another, that is in alignment with the city, and so I think
Yeah.
we're just slipping right into that one.
Yeah,
So-
and I'm not saying this isn't
No, no.
aligned, I'm just saying
No,
that.
no, I get it, but that's a place that I can see the alignment where the city manager is talking about needing to set aside a whole lot of money to take care of deferred maintenance. Well, we're part of that. And so
Right.
we would be part of that budget, and then our parks person out there, his main thing while he's juggling all these other projects is to be sure we're identifying and making progress on the things that need to be brought up the quickest, so that we're functional, so that our infrastructure is functional. And that's not a new idea, but that's an example of what you're talking about. If that's a city goal, then we're right on it, and we're not going to be off proposing projects that don't fit that.
Okay.
The idea of the aquatic center, I don't know what to call it, but upgrading our aquatic capacity has been on the agenda since I started 5 years ago, and it was well before that. So
Right.
it's still there. We have a functioning Daniel Myers pool. We know the infrastructure is going to collapse one of these days. So we as a city, and I've talked to counselors about that, we need to be finding another place for a pool, and then we'll decide what to do with Daniel Meyer. That's my personal lobbying effort, and we've never voted on that. I'm not trying to represent the commission. I'm just saying that it hasn't gone away either. And so that's something for a long-term thing. We're committed to staying with that. Given all the resource constriction going on, we're not giving up on it, and it needs to be in a long-term plan citywide.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lott and then Weiner.
First of all, I'd like to say that I do see one omission in the parks and open space and trails. And that is, doesn't say anything about the Lithia Park Master Plan. And
Did I mention it? Oh, I mentioned the Trails Master Plan, and I was thinking about putting Lithia in there somewhere, thank you.
well, I think that's more important than the Trails Master Plan. Lithia Park Master Plan, we've put a lot of effort into that over a lot of years. It needs to be on that list, in my opinion. The other thing I'd like to say is that, although I understand Commissioner Adams', frustration about process, because that's always an issue. But I'm not so sure this has been it's been worse. And the other part of it is, this is early in the process. And so this is a draft of something that we could either decide to revise, refine, and ultimately vote on, or we could just toss it out. I mean, those are the options we have. And, but I think having a draft where somebody actually goes to the work of actually putting things down on paper is really important. So for me, that's a great start. I mean, obviously, you guys know me. I'm not going to just say, okay, great, you did it, I'm done. But I think having someone gone to that effort is a great first step. And I want to thank Commissioner Bachmann for doing that. And yes, I think there's a fair bit of work to be done. And I think that idea of including, making sure that it's consistent with the pros plan, I think is really important. So there's more work to be done, but I don't think that we're derailed at this point with the process. I think the process, maybe it was off to a stutter start, but it's certainly easily recoverable. So in the end, we have a process that we not only have a good product, but we also have a good process.
Well, let me ask this again. Do we need to schedule another multi-hour meeting, or can we cover, my thought was maybe we could have it inclusive by talking about it in serial study sessions and giving up plenty of time, rather than, getting staff out on Saturday again. Although, again, the next step in general is if you follow, if you like where we're going with this, somehow making sure we have the time to talk in public about it and not just, we can do one-way information without debating what the final product is, without violating public meeting law, but it's awkward. This is better. And the next step in August or September is we do have a retreat, and it's strictly the next biennial budget, where we do exactly what you said, which was we pull the goals from last year and we review them, and then we have that process just for that budget. So that is coming, that particular style of meeting. Okay, so Commissioner Weiner.
I appreciate the discussion. I'm a little challenged with the process as well. And I've been trying to figure out, because I don't disagree with or dislike any of the statements in this, but so I've been trying to figure out exactly what I don't like about it. And I think what that is I don't know what it is. It's a conflation of is it a strategic plan? Is it a vision statement? Is it all of the above. I mean, the statement, like, while I 100% agree with the statement that you know, that we believe the separate elected APRC, blah, blah, blah. What, does that, I believe that to be not for 7 years. I believe that to be, like, does that fit into a 7-year? Like, I mean, so I don't really know what we're doing with, so they're different. Visions and strategic plans are different. I'm not feeling,
It's not a strategic plan. I'll just say
So-
that.
so what
I can
is it?
say what it's not. Does it need a label? Yeah.
I mean, it helps to know what
Well,
we're doing.
That's it, and so it's not what the city consultants would call a strategic plan. I call it strategic thinking. Thinking beyond East Main Park, thinking beyond, how we're gonna do the curb. So it's about what's our direction for the next multiple biennia. What do we want to keep going? What do we think we have to drop out? If we could come to the conclusion that maybe Ashland shouldn't have an aquatic center, there's maybe the aquatic community needs to go elsewhere. We could, I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying that I personally think we do need one. And I think we've been hearing that from the commission at large ever since, again, I've been on the commission and before when I was watching it. So it's here because we had an ad hoc committee, we've talked about the pool forever, and we're not giving up on it.
So this winds up being a mix of vision statements plus project priorities.
There's two
plus-
different sections, and this hasn't been clear. Remember, it's been in my brain, and I'm glad you're asking the questions. There are two sections. One is the commission's role, and we can't confuse the commission with the department. Commission has some very specific concerns. Rick and Mike and I were on a political action committee to keep this commission alive. So we have post-traumatic stress on that. You cannot take for granted that some firebrand counselor and/or mayor want to take this away. And I think we have to keep that in the front on the radar, that we have to know that we exist at the pleasure, to some extent, of the council mayor, because they have quite a bit of influence about how a charter amendment could be presented to the, it's all political. So we are a political body. So this piece is about us. So that first section, the commission role in city government, I think is a very important thing to keep in mind. And what Commissioner Adams and I did when we were working with the mayor and the council chair was to do this second part, which is to develop a connection between the two elected bodies that would make our existence more likely to continue, because we're all going on the same direction, we're on the same team, we want the same things. Can't forget that. So I want the next commission to think about that. That's all I'm saying when I'm gone, because I'm not running. I'm retiring. And so it's just about creating a little bit of a piece of the institution that then passes on. It's like the Constitution should pass on from Congress to Congress. This is just to keep some sense of the general purpose of this group fresh. Each time another commission comes on, they don't just try to start from scratch. So that's value stuff, right? And then this is about our 3 divisions. That's all department stuff. So it has 2 pieces in that sense. And we have obviously influence, but this document doesn't direct staff to do anything. When we do the budget, that is directing staff what to do the whole next 2 years. And so there's 2 different things going on. And that's why I tried to make this high-level framework within which we can work on the short-term business planning. I don't want, we can come up with a better title and label it. It's nothing, I wasn't trying to take a textbook and execute some written plan elsewhere. I just, what do I personally want to do when I leave the commission to help carry on? That's all. Okay.
So the budget, in essence, is our work plan. when we start working on the
Pretty
budget.
much, when the budget, we do the budget planning, the budget is the department's work plan, that's right. And it's not the budget itself, but the budget, goals we
Includes
set.
the work plan.
we're gonna set goals, and then the budget has to be built to support those goals.
Correct.
And then we have a certain amount of financial resources dictated by reality, and so some of our goals won't get met. That's why we prioritize. That's my thinking of the process. So I'll continue on with your not input, but collaboratively. Different idea. Commissioner Gardner.
So what is the next step? I mean, I was just looking at the look ahead, even though we're going to talk about it later. So we don't have a study session next month.
Let me talk about the look ahead.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah, because
Well, I'm just saying, we're not even going to have a study session until September.
no, that's not true. So I was talking with the acting director before the meeting, and there's going to be a whole lot of revision on this.
Okay, all right.
This is based, there were summer breaks for some reason that crept into the council schedule. I don't know
So-
when that happened, but we're not
so-
going to follow it.
The Parks Commission actually voted on the schedule back in January. So if that's something that you want, you all voted in a summer break where you didn't have study sessions in July or August.
We
You
did?
still had
For
regular
two?
meetings. Two, July and August, both of the, according to, yeah, there was July and August were both going to be breaks for study sessions. You would still have regular meetings. And that was voted on by the Parks Commission back in either December. It was before, when the former director was still here. So if you want to revise that, we can look at revising that.
Let's look at revising that. I would suggest, and we can talk about this more, let's bring it back as an action item next week.
Okay.
That fast, and let's make sure we are happy with the schedule for the rest of the year, because I don't want to give up 2 meetings in a row like that. We were talking maybe the July, we'll talk more next week, but maybe the July 1st, because it's right in the middle of a holiday weekend, or whatever that falls. But by the time we're in August, we're talking about the budget again, and I think we should have a study session in August.
If I may, too, initially, the joint session was going to be in May, so we
Yeah.
wouldn't have been skipping two since
Right.
they ended up moving that meeting.
No, I understand that.
So we're losing a study session in June, and we're losing a study session in September.
Right, because of the joint meetings.
Yeah,
Correct.
So it
Yeah,
makes
so
it
we
a
need
little.
we need at least August back, but let's firm that up in a short conversation next week. So bring us back our schedule.
We'll bring back a schedule and I'll
and
write
we'll-
a brief
we'll-
memo.
We'll
for that.
revise, yeah, we'll discuss and vote on it.
If I can just give a couple on the look ahead, this
Please.
one is actually updated as to what's in your packet. So next week, we'll have the Ashland Fish Rehabilitation Project. Scott Howell will be here from Rogue River Council, River Council, to discuss the fish rehabilitation project. And normally, I wouldn't be asking for, I would be just providing information, but we are looking at a timeline for that project in order to get permitting and things like that. So he's going to be talking in detail about the project, and we'll be looking, hopefully, for the commission to take some action on that evening, and that is part of the master plan as well. So that'll be in the packet. So June 3rd is the joint session between City Council and Parks Commission. So any items that are on, so you'll see the CIP, and then if we work on more vision, that will move to the regular meeting on the 10th. And then we will start getting into summer. And we do have some topics that have yet to be scheduled. The CIP may not be happening in June. I think we might wait until after East Main and the tennis courts are, we have the bids back for those. So that might be coming in July to the commission instead of in June. And then we also will need to, we have a meeting with the Trails Advisory Committee in May, on May 20th. And so the commission, what will be coming to the commission is probably a public process around the Lithia Hillside Trail, coming back to you this summer as well. The Trails Advisory Committee is meeting at 4:15 at the Grove on May 20th to discuss next steps for some trail projects.
I see, here we have the resolution regarding, on Cinco de Mayo, that the council was looking at the Pioneer Community Center use yesterday.
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you, can you tell us more about,
Yeah,
I saw what you sent.
About that, but the update is that the staff that is in the main hall of the community center, so there's 3 staff that will be moved out of the main hall proper of the community center. That there will be staff, city staff, that will remain in the community center in the side offices, but the main center will be open for rentals at a date to be determined. So probably in the next month or two. My understanding is that Public Works is still waiting on the interior and exterior doors that were supposed to be put in the community center. So my hope is we can open that building for rentals as soon as possible.
So here's a scenario that during the day, somebody's using the community center and the city manager and the deputy city manager and HR are still in there?
Correct.
Are there rooms?
Correct.
Interesting.
With closed doors. I mean, it's happened in the past. Not the city manager has not been in that building, but we have had staff in that building previously. So it can work.
Okay, and 3 people are leaving, 3 are staying, 3 are leaving?
Yeah, three are moving to, my understanding, community development building. There's
Not
some
here.
cubicles there.
Not the
to
Grove, okay.
The Grove will not be affected by this.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams?
I wanted to get some clarity on the process around the trails proposal for a trail on the hillside below Glenview. So the Trails Advisory Committee voted 5-6 on November 18th to recommend that trail to the Parks Commission. There was a public meeting law complaint by the single dissenting member of that advisory committee that was found that was unfounded. First, that was the determination of our legal department, and then by the state. Probably many thousands of dollars spent on that complaint. There is a study, there is an advisory committee meeting scheduled for later this month that I will miss some, if not all of, as I said on multiple Google polls. I'm wondering, like, what's happening with this? It was already recommended. I know that former Director Houston at some point said, we're going to talk about it again. Not sure what we're talking about again. It wasn't a close vote. And the public meeting law complaint was not upheld. So I'm wondering what our process is here.
So I think the next step, I've been trying to get up to speed on the TAC committee, and I have met with the chair of the advisory committee, got up to speed on the concerns and issues. I think the next step with this particular trail is to basically have the TAC come and present to the commission, but also discuss what any, and if any, I don't think this process, in my opinion, didn't include any concerns, staff concerns related to the trail. And I think we also are going to have to go through maybe another 30-day public process where we take input from the community. So I want to be able to set that up with the committee, talk about when they can come present to the commission, and also set up a public process piece of that, because it has been a while since the last time we talked about this. So that would be my recommendation.
I see, and Commissioner Long, I'll get you in a second. So let me make sure I understood what you just said, which is that the meeting on the 20th, which is me independent of that, what your question was, that you're ready to present a recommendation or a proposal for that trail. Not you, but the committee, because with that, it's the committee, not the liaison, that'll present that recommendation to us.
Correct.
And that could happen right away, and then we would have direction to do the outreach, find out what the community thinks, and then we could deliberate at some point after that and make a decision. That's kind of how I would see it going. I don't want to delay hearing the proposal anymore. Commissioner Lant.
Yeah, that process sounds fine to me. I think this is a really an issue that a lot of people, different sides of the issue, are very concerned about, and so I think I think it really requires a really aggressive public outreach, and I would do this kind of thing that the city does with planning actions, and that's is to put signs at the trailheads in that upper Lithia Park, so that it's really well known what is being planned.
Yeah, I think it's important to mark the area as well, where it would come out at.
Actually, better yet, it should have the trail should just be flagged, not with permanent purple paint the way it was in the past.
Do
But
irrigation flags or something.
pardon me,
Irrigation
Yeah.
flags or something like that.
we had a little glitch at one point.
Commissioner Adams.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I'm just trying to feel out process here, and I actually think like what we're doing right now is exactly what we should be doing. That I think part of my point is that it is the job of the Trails Advisory Committee to advise this commission. They have made their advice. It's not actually the job of the Trails Advisory Committee to determine how this body takes public input. That's our job. So if I were making, I'm going to make a recommendation to the chair, who I'm addressing, because that's how Roger's rules work. If I were to make a recommendation to the chair, I would say, we have a proposal. It's been approved. I agree with Commissioner Lant that this is a proposal that's going to have a lot of opinions from the community that we, as a representative body, need to hear. And I think that our body should figure out how we want to do that process. I mean, we can get advice from the Trails Advisory Committee, but that's not really their job. I think we should decide here what our process looks like. And I agree with Commissioner Lant that the idea of an open forum, really something on the order of, when I see gaps in our calendar, 2-hour gaps in our calendar, I think about like a study session that's dedicated just to this, right? So that if we have that parking lot full again, like we did with
Pickleball,
Hunter
tennis.
Park discussions, great. We got plenty of time. We maybe,
Absolutely.
I don't know, we maybe don't need to limit people to 2 minutes. Maybe they get their full 3, and we let opinions be heard, and then we move forward from there. But to me, that's what makes sense as the next step. As far as flagging the trail goes, I'm not opposed to, I think it makes sense for people to understand where it is. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure we want a whole lot of people on that hillside off trail right now. Whole lot of poison oak there. Or I guess we could put warning signs. If you're going to try to follow those flags, you better have Techno at home. But, and again, like wandering off trail on that hillside, probably not totally safe for a number of other reasons outside of poison oak. But it wouldn't be hard to flag. There's probably even some spurious purple marks that we could follow. And it's all mapped out and everything like that in the proposal.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask staff to get with the leadership of the TAC and see if they can come to our June meeting and give us that proposal. I think next week would be a little quick.
So our June meeting is a study session.
Well, no, it's not. It's a.
Oh, it's a regular meeting,
It's
you're
a
right.
regular meeting
Correct.
that's going to have a lot of information items in it because we had to cancel our study session to do the joint session.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I'm saying that out loud for everybody.
Yeah, I'll get a hold of Chair Cott on that and see
So
if
let's
he's available
put
for
that on the look ahead for June, and then we'll proceed from there.
Okay,
Okay?
sounds great.
It is something that needs to be resolved. We work it. Commissioner Gardner.
Just as far as topics on the look ahead, in Acting Director Dials and I had a conversation on Monday. The CIP discussion is kind of important because there's a couple items that need to get on our CIP. One of them is the golf course pole replacement. It's not on our current CIP. So if we're going to move forward with it in any way, shape, and form, it needs to be on there. The other thing is the proposal that we heard a month or so ago about this proposed Lithia Pavilion over the ice rink. That's also not on our CIP. And we need to get those projects. And there was one other one I can't.
The pickleball courts.
And the
8
pickleball courts that we promised we would look at in the future. So we need to have that on a CIP project. So it's important to get those on there just because it'll need to go through us and then it'll need to go to the city council to approve our CIP. So
I had that on the meeting scheduled for June. I'm a little hesitant on that, only because we still have a few things to do behind the scenes as far as getting information on how much things are going to cost and things
Yeah.
like that. So that may be pushed to July, but it's definitely on the list.
Well, and the process there is, we're in the process of bidding projects, and so
Yes.
we won't know the answers until late May, which will
Correct.
give us a sense of where the supply chain issues are and what it's going to cost us to do anything.
Correct.
Right, okay, so
right,
it would be a
to get it on the
push.
CIP. All you need to do is put a number, your estimated number on it.
Right, and so that,
Even if you don't have the funding.
we can still do that for June, just to do what Mike's saying, get things on the plan, even though we haven't quantified them yet. Which doesn't sound like a plan, but you know, it's a rough draft like most of the work we do. Commissioner Weiner.
Thanks. Just looking at next week's 513, the information and action on the Ashland Fish Rehabilitation Project. As there's going to be information presented and then a request for an action, I'd request that any presentation that they're going to put forward get to us ASAP
Yeah. Absolutely.
so that we can review it in advance.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, and we only do that kind of thing when we think it's a pretty simple decision, but getting the information out before the meeting is kind of important, right? Okay, anybody else? Anything at all? Okay, meeting adjourned.